47-year-old Marilyn Brinson was living the picture-perfect life. She and her devoted husband, John, were raising 4 lovely children in a quaint middle-class suburb north of Kansas City.
They were happy-go-lucky, always had a lot of fun. I think the most important thing to my mom was family.
Transplants from New York City, John and Marilyn's love for one another seemed as strong as the day they met.
They met when they were both teenagers and still in high school.
Though Marilyn had played hard to get at first, John ultimately won her over.
He was a gentleman. I mean, he'll open the door for you. You don't see too much of that anymore.
In 1976, after several years of dating, John and Marilyn tied the knot. Over time, the couple had 4 children, but as the family began to grow, so did John's desire to leave New York.
He wanted his family to have a better life and not be bogged down by the hustle and bustle of the city.
So in September of 1997, John and Marilyn headed west, ultimately settling into a well-appointed apartment in the cozy suburbs of Kansas City.
There wasn't tall buildings everywhere, green grass everywhere. It was kind of a shock, but it was a welcome shock, away from the sirens and the noise and trouble of New York City.
We moved down there and we actually enjoyed it and we loved it. My dad worked for the wastewater treatment plant. I think that probably put a smile on his face. I think he liked it a lot.
While John worked to provide for the family, Marilyn relished the role of homemaker.
My mom worked really hard as well, staying at home, raising us children. She was one of the kindest, most loving women that you would ever meet.
Over the next several years, the children graduated high school and struck out on their own. But the Brinsons remained a tight-knit family.
We were still close. We wouldn't spend every single day together, but we would spend quite a bit of time together when we had the opportunity.
Now faced with an empty nest, Marilyn decided to enter the workforce for the first time in her life.
She had gotten a job as a clerk at a gas station convenience store.
She liked working because she was interacting with customers and, and she was friendly.
Though Marilyn loved her job, it paled in comparison to another role she was now playing, that of grandmother.
When she became a grandmother for the very first time, she was ecstatic.
Between a nice home in the suburbs, jobs they enjoyed, 4 loving children, and a growing brood of grandkids, it seemed Marilyn and her husband John had it all.
It's almost kind of like a storybook, It was like they lived behind a white picket fence.
But on July 16, 2002, all that the Brinsons had worked their entire lives to build seems to be tumbling down.
A good amount of blood was found in the floorboard of her car.
Once detectives arrived, they quickly realized they could be looking at a possible homicide.
It was so much blood in the vehicle that it was overflowing, seeping out of the passenger side door. That's a lot of blood. They had to presume she's dead. She's not coming back.
There's blood spatter in the car that would be consistent with a possible gunshot wound.
The impact site would be consistent with someone being in that passenger seat and basically being up against the door, trying to get away from someone with a gun.
Detectives also find evidence that indicates the perpetrator made an effort to cover their tracks.
There was a rag that had been stuffed in the gas tank, partially burned.
Obviously, somebody attempted to burn this car.
Fortunately, that's not like the movies. That rarely works. It actually just burned out, and whoever had done that didn't stay to see that. So our crime scene was still intact.
But who would want to harm Marilyn Brinson? Detectives are still pondering the possibilities when Marilyn's husband John and her son Jermaine arrive at the scene.
There was a crime scene down there. That's when I knew it wasn't good.
Take a deep breath. But that's my wife, call. Marilyn! Dad, calm down. It's gonna be all right.
John Brinson showed up at the scene, acting very emotional, trying to charge the vehicle, charge through the police line.
Sir, everything's gonna be okay.
She's fine. I kept trying to tell myself that over and over again to make sure I could keep my sanity. Because I knew something was going on.
Once John calms down, he agrees to accompany police to the station and give them a formal statement.
That's what we do. We talk to the people closest to the victim first.
With John en route to the station, investigators turn their attention back to Marilyn's car.
There really wasn't much to indicate that the crime had happened in this spot. There was, however, some mud on the outside of the car. The detectives collected that and sent that to the lab as well.
Where the vehicle was, it was pretty much assumed that that was not where the crime occurred. So there's not a good chance of evidence being there other than the vehicle itself. The vehicle itself is contained, so we can take it over to the garage where it'll be protected, and we don't have to worry about any contamination of it.
As they wait for the tow truck to arrive, officers search some nearby woods for additional evidence.
When you find a vehicle dumped, you're going to start from that point working outward and start looking for evidence. Maybe the victim had walked off in the woods. Maybe somebody had dumped the victim in the woods.
To assist in their search, detectives also call in a canine unit.
The canines show up and their trainer takes them to the vehicle, and the dogs end up taking off from there and basically go on hot pursuit.
They're following the scent of whoever left that vehicle. Because of the amount of blood they had there, we would have seen blood where the victim went. So it had to be either a suspect or a witness leaving the scene.
But 100 yards into the woods, the trail goes cold.
They were doing the searching, and then they lost us.
The forensic evidence collected from the vehicle suggests Marilyn may have been shot in the front passenger seat of her own car.
There was an amount of blood that would make you think that the person is critically injured or has died.
But if Marilyn had been shot, where is she now?
No hospital at or near the time that she disappeared had admitted Marilyn Brinson for any sort of medical care.
And who would have wanted to harm her? To help answer that question, detectives sit down at the station with Marilyn's husband, John. From the outset of the interview, John's concern for his wife is apparent.
If anything I can do to help you guys find my wife, just tell me what to do.
What we need you to do now is walk us through what happened today. When was the last time you saw Marilyn?
Well, that's just it. I haven't seen her all day. We went to bed together, woke up, and she was gone.
According to John, when the alarm went off this morning, Marilyn wasn't in bed.
He just assumed that Marilyn was in the bathroom taking a shower. He got up, went to the bathroom, there was no Marilyn.
I got up, I looked around, and I noticed she wasn't there. I noticed her car was gone.
John says at first he assumed Marilyn had gone into work early, but when he called her cell phone and she didn't answer, he started to worry.
Hey, please give me a call when you get a chance. Okay, bye.
John says that he tried calling Marilyn for more than an hour. Finally, around 7:30 a.m., his phone rang.
Baby, where have you been?
He said, so where you been? Thinking it was Marilyn calling him, and it wasn't. It was the supervisor at Marilyn's job that was calling. She didn't show up to work.
John tells detectives that several more hours passed with no word from Marilyn, at which point John tried to file a missing persons report, but was told by police that it was too soon to do so.
A healthy adult who is only missing overnight is not something that would immediately put out the alert.
Sir, do you have any idea where your wife might have been going this morning if she wasn't going to work?
Something I think you need to know.
That's when John reveals a shocking secret about his wife.
Marilyn Brinson had been having an affair with a man named Dante.
According to John, the affair started shortly after Marilyn began working at the convenience store.
He worked on the cleaning crew, and he always seemed very mild-tempered, just kind of a smoothie, if you will.
So you're gonna let me take you out and quit playing all these games, huh?
You do know I'm married, right?
This other guy wanted to be with Mom, but I don't think she was 100% sure on what she wanted to do as far as moving forward with this other dude.
Marilyn found the attention she was getting from Dante to be really exciting, and her relationship with John had gotten kind of stale by this point, so it was nice for her to feel that spark again.
Whether it was a deep-seated attraction to Dante or simply a longing for something new, Marilyn eventually gave in to Dante's advances.
John Brinson found out about that affair and was very upset.
I think my sister told him what was going on.
What did you do?
Oh, we argued. I mean, a lot. I'm not even gonna lie. I even thought about divorcing her, but I figure we need to give this marriage a second chance.
John, I know, wanted to make it work still, because he believed in the marriage to the end.
John said that eventually he and Marilyn reconciled.
He did want them to go to counseling, and I know they did do that. He said it helped a lot of things.
How were things after that?
Seems good. I woke up, she wasn't there, so I looked on the dresser and I saw a wedding ring.
He said she left me for him. That's exactly what he thought.
Your wife's infidelity caused you to have thoughts of hurting her, killing her.
No. I love Marilyn. I'd never do that.
We're gonna need to prove that.
We asked him for a buccal swab, which is our DNA sample, or something to physically eliminate him from the scene.
The detectives also take John's fingerprints and scrapings from underneath his fingernails.
He was 100% cooperative with us.
Not only did John willingly provide DNA samples to detectives, when investigators follow up with John's children, they corroborate his statement.
Some of the family members had informed law enforcement of the fact that Dante had been pressing Marilyn Brinson to leave John Brinson and run off with him.
The guy she was seeing had done something. That was the first thing that came to my mind.
Dante's obvious motive, as far as law enforcement's concerned at this stage of their investigation, is perhaps that he's wanting her to leave, but she maybe is unwilling to leave.
So you know you should run away with me, right?
I can't do that.
Come on, baby.
Oh, look, I can't leave my family. I have too much invested. I gotta go.
Therefore, he could be a suspect because he wasn't happy with the outcome of the relationship.
The next morning, detectives dig into Dante's records, and what they discover moves Dante from person of interest to possible suspect.
He lived geographically pretty close to where her vehicle was recovered. The fact that she has a relationship with this guy and the geographic proximity to the place where the vehicle was dumped, yeah, we were interested in him.
Armed with this new information, detectives bring Dante in for questioning.
So what is this all about? Well, we need to know if you know a Marilyn Brinson.
Yeah, I do.
He verified that he did know Marilyn and that they had been in an ongoing situation.
When was the last time you saw her?
A month ago. Why?
Well, did you know she's missing?
When did this happen?
He denied any knowledge of what had happened to her.
Hold on. You guys don't think I had anything to do with this, do you?
Well, I don't know. You tell us. One of the first things that they want to do is find out whether or not he has an alibi.
Where were you 2 nights ago on July 15th?
I was at work. You can call and ask my boss about that.
However, before detectives can look into Dante's alibi, they get a call informing them that a maintenance man has just found a gun at the apartment complex where the Brinsons reside.
You the one that called?
Yes, sir. I sure did. It's right over there behind the bush.
The gun didn't show evidence that it had been outside for a long time.
The detectives didn't have a body or any slugs to compare the gun to, but they decided to take it for testing anyway.
Did you hear any gunfire the night of July 15th?
I did.
Where'd you hear that?
It's just over there.
Residents of the apartment complex came forward and explained that they had heard a single gunshot come from the parking lot that night.
Searching the area, detectives uncover what could be another critical clue.
Over here.
Investigators were able to find some blood in the parking lot in a parking spot very near the front door to the Brinsons' apartment.
It wasn't an overwhelming amount of blood as was inside the car, but there was a few spots.
But until the forensic analysis is complete, police can't say for sure that the blood in the car is Marilyn's.
It's not like on TV where they do the DNA overnight. You know, it's going to take some time.
At that point, the only persons of interest police have identified in the case are Marilyn's husband, John Brinson, and a former coworker of hers she had been having an affair with named Dante.
Even though John was the last person to see her alive, he was forthcoming in a statement to police, and he willingly offered up his DNA for analysis.
He also was open about his knowledge of Marilyn's affair and the pain that it caused him. And at this point, to police, he seemed like he was telling the truth and genuinely worried about his wife.
However, detectives haven't gotten the same vibe from Marilyn's lover, Dante.
Dante lived close to where the car was found.
But until investigators can get DNA results back or confirm Dante's alibi, there's not much else they can do.
On July 26th, detectives received the results of the DNA testing.
The lab is able to come to a number of conclusions. And I think first and clearly, the most important is that the blood in the vehicle is Marilyn Brinson's blood.
The fact that the blood belongs to Marilyn further cements their suspicion that Marilyn Brinson is dead.
Forensic investigators were able to determine through measuring the blood that was found in the floorboard on the mat inside the vehicle that a human being could not have lost that volume of blood and survived.
I don't think I had a worse day since that day. It's like my heart was just ripped out of my chest.
It was really hard to hear, and it was really hard to swallow. You want to believe that she's okay, she's gonna come back.
Marilyn's death hits her husband John especially hard.
When Marilyn died, John went into a pit of despair. And like a lot of people grieving the loss of a loved one, John turned to alcohol to numb his pain.
He would drink a lot. He would drink to the point to where he would get drunk. And then I remember him calling out my mother's name.
This man's suffering, my dad's suffering, because he just lost his wife.
While Marilyn's family grieves, police are desperately searching to find her remains.
You start speculating. If I was a killer and I wanted to get rid of a body, maybe it would be somewhere near where they dumped the vehicle. So we just start looking places where we speculate they may want to dump a body.
In order to narrow down the area they must search, detectives turn to the analysis of the mud collected from the outside of Marilyn's vehicle.
In this report, they began talking about diatoms.
Diatoms are basically microorganisms that are usually found near or in free-flowing fresh water bodies.
And upon examining the mud, they were able to determine that it had diatoms in it that are only found in the Missouri River.
Which might have been a good place to hide or dispose of a body.
While the report gives the probable location of Marilyn's body, the information still doesn't tell detectives who killed her. Fortunately, they are able to rule out one suspect.
We checked his alibi. We followed up on what he told us. He had one of the best alibis I'd ever heard in my life.
He had been working that night and into the morning hours, was actually locked in his place of employment and unable to leave.
Then on July 31st, 2002, 15 days into the investigation, another resident from the Brinsons' apartment complex contacts detectives with information about the days leading up to Marilyn's disappearance.
The neighbor said he'd seen John Brinson a day or two before Marilyn's disappearance, and John clearly seemed agitated about something.
John believed that Marilyn was going to be leaving him, but he told the resident that that wasn't going to happen because he wasn't going to let it happen. So at this point in the investigation, law enforcement had begun to be suspicious of John Brinson.
Hoping to learn more about John and Marilyn's marriage, detectives again turned to the couple's children, starting with 23-year-old Tyrone.
How would you describe your mom and dad's relationship?
Growing up, things was great. But then in the last few years, things kind of changed.
Because your mom and Dante's relationship?
No, before that.
According to Tyrone, the trouble started long before Dante entered the picture.
My father had cheated on my mom.
How do you know?
Me and my mom caught him.
I actually remember that night pretty clearly. We found the vehicle that he was driving, and we found the motel where he was in.
It put her in a really I wouldn't say a dark place, but she just was, you know, it made her upset. It made her angry.
But according to Tyrone, his mother refused to give up on her marriage.
Hey, are we gonna talk about this or what?
What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's not good enough. I can't just forget about what happened.
She confronted him. They got into a big argument, but they kind of worked through that.
Things were going pretty good. Things were going pretty smooth.
Once John and Marilyn became grandparents, things really seemed to be back on even keel.
They really seem to have worked through their troubles.
But Tyrone believes everything changed once his mother went to work.
During this time, it is believed that John's cheating ways resurfaced, which not only angered Marilyn, but drove her into the arms of Dante, who seemed like the only man who genuinely wanted to be with her.
It probably felt good to have someone show her the love that any woman deserves. Even though the act is wrong in itself, I don't fault her for that.
Tyrone tells police that when his father found out about Dante, he demanded Marilyn call off the affair. But she refused.
My mom was more confident in herself. You know, she would put my dad down. Whatever, you've been doing this, now I'm doing this.
Well, now you see how it feels.
She would throw this man in his face.
And that's when the abuse started to happen.
I'm gonna show you how I feel.
Her having a boyfriend rubbed him real wrong, you know, and made the ugly person come out. You know, he obviously could not control himself.
I would hear stuff my dad was putting his hands on her. He was beating her up pretty good, and boy, did it get back quick.
She would always tell me, Tyrone, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. She would always say it. And her spirit was broken. She didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I will never forget what my mom told me the day before she went missing. I was sitting in the passenger seat of my car, and my mom was looking down at me. And she says, Tyrone, if I decide to leave in the morning, no one is going to be able to find me. And when she said that to me, I just knew she was done. She was hurting so bad.
Based on his final conversation with his mother, Tyrone admits that when she went missing the next morning, he and his siblings thought it was all part of a grand plan to be free of her husband once and for all.
Could my mom have staged her death? Or was she actually dead? She needed to get away. And I thought maybe this is what she was able to achieve.
Tyrone, do you really think it's possible your mother would have staged her own death so she could have been rid of your father once and for all?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So why didn't you tell us all this before?
I just didn't want to believe it was true, man. My family was just falling apart like that.
However, listening to Tyrone, detectives take an entirely different view of Marilyn's situation.
The issue with domestic violence for the abuser is control. So if they feel that the person they're attempting to control is not under their control anymore, that's when they get more aggressive and bad things happen.
Adding fuel to this theory is another report from the crime lab. While examining Marilyn's vehicle, CSIs were able to uncover a crucial piece of evidence.
On the back of the vehicle, there was a muddy/bloody handprint. And the blood contained in that palm print belongs to Marilyn Brinson.
The entire case was riding on whether or not the palm print that the crime lab found in the mud was a match for John's.
In fictional television shows, fingerprints are everywhere. They get fingerprints off of all kinds of things that just don't happen in real life. I've worked many, many years in homicide and have very few fingerprint hits. So even when you get fingerprints, sometimes they aren't of value.
On the afternoon of August 8th, investigators received the results of John Brinson's handprint analysis.
The handprint that was found on the trunk lid proved to be John Brinson's handprint.
And that isn't all.
The fingernail scrapings that was taken that night from John had diatoms in it, and that the lab was able to say that they were consistent with the diatoms from the mud sample with the fingerprint in the blood. When we get a lab report saying that, yes, we have identified this print, and this is her blood that's in that fingerprint, along with river mud, that's almost like they're handing you a script saying this is what happened.
However, there is one huge piece of evidence that investigators still don't have.
The fact that we didn't have Marilyn's body was a big hurdle.
Anytime you don't have a body, that concrete thing to show a jury, that's going to be a challenge.
And though investigators found what they believe is the murder weapon, without a body, it's hard to tie it concretely to the case.
Law enforcement, through their investigation, realized that there isn't anything specifically linking that particular firearm to the crime.
So before they formally charge John Brinson with murder, detectives make one final push to find Marilyn's remains.
Just for the integrity of our case, we want to find Marilyn's body. But beyond that, there's a human being out there that has not been put in their final place. There's a family out there who are wondering what's going on with that.
The idea of not knowing where she's at just blows my mind.
Unfortunately for both police and Marilyn's family, after 3 weeks of searching, they are still unable to find her body.
River is constantly ebbing and flowing and changing. So if she was on the edge of the river or in the river, there's a limited amount of time you're going to have to find evidence.
Prosecutors decide to roll the dice.
They take the case to the grand jury to see if they can secure a murder indictment against John Brinson based on the evidence they have.
We wanted to kind of get a feel for whether the jury would consider finding someone guilty knowing that there was no body.
The gamble pays off.
John Brinson was indicted by the Clay County Grand Jury.
On August 13, 2002, detectives placed John Brinson under arrest for the murder of his wife, Marilyn.
When I found out that he was arrested, I was just numb and angry and mad, you know, that he did it. At the same time, I didn't want to believe that he did it.
I kept thinking there's got to be more to the story.
When the case finally goes to trial in October of 2006, prosecutors are worried the jury will echo those same concerns.
As long as we don't have a body, there's always going to be that back of the brain thought, well, what if?
In their opening statements, prosecutors argue that even without Marilyn's body, there's no doubt what happened to her.
On the night of the crime, I believe they were arguing in front of the apartment inside the vehicle. Tempers flared.
He thought she was likely to leave, and he wasn't going to let her.
John shot Marilyn in her car, in the passenger seat, in the parking lot, right out in front of their house.
These are usually actions of emotion, especially in domestic violence. And I have no doubt that the second they commit this crime, that they are instantly, oh my God, what have I done?
Prosecutors say that after shooting Marilyn, John hid the gun in the bushes.
When people commit a crime of this nature, they aren't thinking that clearly. So usually their attempts to stage and alter and hide evidence usually end up causing more evidence.
Prosecutors believe John then drove to the nearby Missouri River and disposed of Marilyn's body, an assertion supported by the diatoms found in the palm prints and blood collected at the crime scene. After dumping his wife's body in the river, John then drove to the wooded area on the east side of town and tried to set Marilyn's car on fire.
The fact that the car did not actually ignite was great because a very large portion of our case was associated with that car. The physical evidence we got off that car proved to be key.
When it's their turn, the defense fires back by putting forth the theory that Marilyn could still be alive.
The defense attorney tried to argue that she may have run off on her own and was still alive and just had basically abandoned her family.
But will the fact that police never found Marilyn's body be enough for an acquittal? On October 30th, 2006, the jury returns with their verdict.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. He knew it was over. That was the happiest days of all of our lives. The happiest days.
The judge sentences John to life in prison.
When he went to prison, I was relieved. At the same time, I was kind of hurt because, you know, I just lost both my parents.
But for some family members, they feel the full truth has yet to be uncovered.
For me, I honestly don't know what happened. I don't allow myself to draw conclusions, so I just accept that something happened.
On February 3rd, 2017, John Brinson dies in prison.
He died of liver cancer. It was very painful for him.
Although Marilyn's body has never been found, her spirit carries on in her children and grandchildren.
Every time I look at my daughter, I see my mom. She lives on, and I get to see her through my daughter every day. And that gives me comfort. It gives me peace.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available.